and welcome to another Tim Talk podcast by Celtic Down Under. I'm your host, Jarrod, and joining me on this podcast is Brian Degning from the Celtic State of Mind podcast. How you doing, Brian?
I'm great, mate. Top of the world. Very grateful to be here chatting to you today.
It's good to have you on. Thanks for getting involved. We'll really enjoying doing these Tim Talk podcasts, so thanks for giving up some of your time to have a chat with me.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure, mate. It's always great to talk about Celtic.
Of course it is. I think my wife, before she goes to me, "Oh, you got a girlfriend's name?" I said, "Yeah, of course, it's Celtic. That's what I've got to go do now. Come on, rush, got to go." So that's just how it is, and pretty much all Celtic fans' households, or that's what I would assume anyway. We're all a bit mad, so it's good to have a chat about it. So
yeah, sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, we'll just start off with my usual first question on these Tim Talk podcasts because, as I've said to you, it's like me being an Australian, go to a CSC, and the first thing you get asked is, "Oh, nice to meet you, Jarrod. So how did you become a Celtic fan?" So for that reason, Brian, how did you become a Celtic fan?
It's interesting. I was having to think about this earlier, and the obvious answer is, the school I went to, most of the guys at school were Celtic fans. My mother was a Celtic fan. She's not a huge football fan, but in Glasgow, Celtic was a sort of, you were almost just part of Celtic. It was like a community thing. It was almost an ideal more than just a footballing thing. So the first question you got asked in Glasgow when you met someone new was, "What team do you support?" And it was either Celtic or, at the time, Rangers. And so you were in one camp or the other. So I was in the Celtic camp, and then as I got a little older and started enjoying football more and understanding it more, you got to love the team, the colours, the personalities, the style of football. And then as I got a bit older and really looked at the history of it, it really filled me with pride that I was a fan and a part of such an amazing club. A club with such a beautiful history of helping, those less fortunate, built on charity, with that strong ethos of community and that idea of a club for everyone. And that's something that's close to my heart is that, everyone's equal, everyone's important, and no one should be sort of, not selected because of some part of their life. So those sort of charitable ethos and community ethos behind the club was something that I always admired, and it's something that I actually live down south now. I live sort of southwest of England, and whenever I chat to people and they ask me, "What team do you support?" and I say Celtic, and I explain why, and I love it. I love explaining why. I love talking about the club, and not just in a football sense, but what the club represents to me and so many others.
Yeah, it's really, really great. Hang on, yeah, it's really great, the story on like the history of the club and how it was founded by Brother Walfred and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's more than a football club; it's a way of life, and we've got such a wide-ranging supporter base all across the world, and yeah, a lot of us are all of the same mindset. So it's just really good to be a Celtic fan, and especially with you touching on it like that, it's when you explain it to other people who aren't Celtic fans, and they go, "Really? That's how your club was founded?" It's suddenly any misconceptions out about the club, it suddenly just like makes them back up and go, "Oh, yeah, okay, it's more than football." So it's just great seeing their reactions whenever that happens.
Yeah, and I tell you an amazing thing as well, actually. So my soon-to-be wife is Irish, but she was born in Ireland and raised in England, and so she didn't know anything about Celtic. Not interested in sports of any kind. But when I met some of the in-laws, and they were like, "Oh, you're a Celtic fan?" I was like, "Yeah." And then suddenly we sort of knew what each other was about. We sort of could trade stories. They sort of talk about things, and it was just that amazing connection that I love so much. And yeah, there's just always that, I don't know, bit of substance about the club that I don't think you can ever beat. It's unmatched anywhere. Maybe Barcelona is the only club with such a sort of it's a way of life as well as a club. That's probably the only comparable club in the world, I think.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. They're the only one I could think of off the top of my head. Probably if you gave me, 24 hours to have a good think and do some research, I could probably find one or two more. But yeah, us and Barcelona are cut from the same sort of cloth, so it's a good thing there. So we'll get on to something else that we were just discussing off air before we started recording. So, how do you think Ange's doing as a manager?
Wow, it's been incredible, hasn't he? And again, I'm a bit of a football romanticist, and I look at the things, and I just think Ange coming in, and one of my favourite things about him was not just what he's brought as a manager, but what he's brought as a man. He's a real statesman for the club. The way he speaks about life, about motivations, about treating people the right way. It's quite incredible, and it's hard to imagine someone more suited to the club who, was so far away and so uninvolved with the club. It's like he was made to be Celtic manager. He's got that same ethos. Then when you add to that his regard for attacking football, exciting players, I just find him. It's just a perfect match, and it's worked exceptionally well thus far. I'd said on the Celtic State of Mind podcast that at the start of the season when Ange came in, I was very excited because I saw how his teams had played just not before he was announced, but doing a bit of research. And I saw some interviews and I thought, this guy's got something about him. I didn't think we would have won the league last year, if I'm honest. I thought, historically it's taken him a year or two to sort of get going, but then has a sort of long, consistent run of success. And I felt that maybe mirrored at Celtic. So I was delighted to be wrong. And I think I think the fact that he's 57 now, he's been a manager for like 26 years, and he still talks about how much he has to learn and improve. And if you're a player and you're hearing that for your boss, you can't help but want to improve. And it's the fact that, we're heading into the Champions League this year, and I know he's going to say, right, we're playing Real Madrid in the Champions League. Let's beat Real Madrid in the Champions League. Let's win every game. Let's go at it. We're Celtic Football Club. We don't need to back down. We don't need to, cower before anyone. And look, Jarrod, we're going to get a few black eyes along the way, but that's not what it's about. It's about learning, and it's about adapting, and about getting better, and it's about never stopping, as Ange says. And I just think that as a man and as a manager, he's been an incredible addition to Celtic's history now.
It's funny you say that about a few black eyes or whatever, and he'll want to go and beat Real Madrid because a nice little story for you. Way back in like 97, 98, he's manager at South Melbourne in the old NSL, won the league, won through as Oceania champions to go to the Club World Cup. And who did his team draw? Man United, the team that had just won with Beckham and all those guys. And yeah, they went out and had a fair even crack at it. And I think it was, if my memory is right, I think it was only a 1-goal margin at the end of the game. And they actually went out there and full on did not back down. They had a fair income crack at him. So it was, yeah, he's been that way since when I was first starting watching him back in the 90s. So as you said, like he's a statesman, and I was sitting there going, I knew Ange would win the league, but I half expected if we're going to win the league, we'd do it in the second season, which is this season coming up. But then you hear Ange speak, and he said last season was like 2 seasons in one, so it was pre-January post. So I'm excited for it. It's happy days. And yeah, also what you said about the way he talks and he's one doing constant improvement. You hear Kelmack in the media during the week, and he's out there talking about constant improvement. He's still got more to learn that as well. And it's, it's the ethos and, what's important to Ange is rubbing off on everyone. If you've got the gaffer and the captain speaking the same way, then that's the club culture.
The
And
culture, I'm so glad you said culture, because that's another thing that I was, when Neil Lennon left, and it was a bit of a disaster his last season. Although it wouldn't tarnish his legacy, in my opinion, but it was a bit of a disaster, and there was a culture of people not wanting to be there. Training wasn't up to par. People were fed up. And one of the things that Ange said, which is another, it's like reason 1040 why I love Ange Postecoglou, is because he said he doesn't hire players, he hires people, and he loves that. The dynamic, the type of human he wants at the club, the type of person he wants at the club, and that's someone like Calmack, like all these guys came in, and that's why I think they gel so quickly. And that's genius in its own way, to really identify how a group's going to merge together, how they're going to get on together, how they're going to encourage each other to work hard, challenge each other, be competitive without, spitting the dummy or, you'd have thrown in the towel. So I think that's a really underestimated part of management, and he's instilled a culture so quickly. And I don't know, excuse my ignorance, but as far as I'm aware, this is the most games he's ever played and managed in a season. I think.
Yeah,
I
it would
think
be.
the Australian and Japanese leagues are both shorter, aren't they? Or
Yeah,
there's less games.
the Australian League definitely is. He's probably done the equivalent of 2 A-League seasons in 1 year at Celtic.
Yeah, I think that's the same with the J League.
And the J-League's not as short, but it is, I think it's about 36 games or something like that, where our league's 27 or 28 plus finals.
So it's amazing even to consider that he squeezed two league seasons into one, according to him. He's
Yeah.
also managed, it came there single-handedly, recruited all these players, changed the structure behind the scenes, and managed more games than he's ever managed before, and still won 2 trophies. It's I don't think it can be underestimated. And it's great as well. It's great to see that the excitement in the Australian media. I love the sort of the passion and you can see how much more relaxed he is when he talks to you guys than sometimes he does with the Scottish media, who in general are great. And it's just wonderful to see that engagement and that sort of extra profile as well. So
You
it's
don't have
really
to
good
tell
to
me
see.
you don't have to tell me about the Aussie media. I'm loving actually being able to find a lot more Celtic content over here than having to go fishing and look at all the red top newspapers and stuff like that online now over in Scotland. So yeah, it's great. But yeah, the thing with Ange when he just seems more relaxed talking to our guys, and it's probably because it's the same sort of culture. He knows and trusts a lot of the people he's talking to a lot more. But the other thing that you just touched on was about Ange changing the structure behind the scenes. So ties me into the next thing I wanted to ask you. So what's your take on the club structure, and what do you think is going well? What do you think needs to improve?
So this is a bit of a bugbear of mine. This is something that I've been harping on about for quite a few years actually. Um, so I think the club should be run similar to the way Dortmund, Brentford, Leipzig, Salzburg, those type of clubs are run, where you've got a continuity from academy to first team. What I mean by that is you've got a style of play that you stick with. You recruit players of a certain mould that fit that style. You've got all the best staff, data analysts, recruitment. You get someone overseeing all that, and then the coach can kind of not come and go, but even if the coach leaves, the club ethos, the style, the system's still pretty much the same. You saw it with Jurgen Klopp's a great example of that. And Tuchel at Chelsea, they came from that system. And the clubs they managed, when they left, the clubs didn't crumble and fall apart and go back 10 years. They sort of carried on because they had that. So we look at Celtic at the moment, I feel like Ange is sort of bringing that in. So the academy players that are there, I'm not sure. I think they need a bit of recruitment at academy level, but they're playing a similar way to the first team. So if there's an injury crisis, if there's something goes wrong, in theory they can step straight in. He's also got Mark Lawwell, who is head of recruitment and scouting for the City Group, which is obviously huge. And to get him, I think it's a big coup, but I think it's actually a really good move for the club. It's been a bit controversial because he's Peter Lawwell's son, but I think it's a great move. I think he'll sort of be that overseer and help with that recruitment. I think we've got the data analyst from Benfica, I think. Ortega, the guy's name is. We've got Anton McElhone who was Tottenham's fitness coach. He's our head of sports science. So you can see he's put these things in place to give the players the best chance to be the best they can be. And it's sort of modernised the club almost on the sly. He's kind of done it in the background, just gradually. And the fact he's bringing Harry Kewell and he's also looking at more sort of data positions and analyst roles recruiting this summer, it shows that the club's getting up to speed. Celtic have been a sort of massive club, but ran a little bit analog in a digital world at times.
I
A bit
agree with you
reactive.
100% on that, Brian, because like you're saying there, is I agree with everything you're saying, and I think where he's being clever is end of last season, a lot of players left, right? So we reduced our wage bill. Then you got a couple of big earners like Bitton and Rogic moving on, reduce your wage bill. If we were spending 60 million on player wages, You look at a club like Ajax only paying 40 something, 40, 45 million a year, and they're doing well in the Champions League. There's that 15 million that's allocated wrong. I'd rather put that into the back of house stuff. So you've got your sports scientists, you've got your recruiting, you've got all the stuff you're talking about there, and you back them and you give them not just the main man, but a couple of support staff to do that and grow the back of house thing. And then that's going to set your club up long term as a structure. So spot on with what you're saying. I'll go back to you now. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents worth in there before I forgot it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But yeah, I think that's the way Celtic has to thrive and survive. And you know, I hope that Ange's there for a very long time, but at some point he won't be. And what we need is if he leaves, when Brendan Rodgers left, for example, he took everything from the back of the house. And to be fair, he'd sort of employed most of it. But he took all that away, all that modernisation, and it sets back years, I think. And even though Neil Lennon came back in and done well at the time initially, you could see there was a real backstep. And Ange sort of now, again in that season, sort of bringing it up. One thing that's interesting as well, and I agree with you about the back of house, I would invest in that more. Because if you're investing in really strong recruitment and scouting, you don't have to spend big to get the players in that match the system. You know what I mean? So so we've long had this idea of signing project players where we get these younger guys in and they're good players, and then we try and sell them on for a profit. And I said it was like, you're just throwing at the wall and hope something sticks. Ange's actually still working in that system, but he's just doing it better than anyone else has. Because the players he's signing are all cheap. They're from unfashionable leagues. They're under a certain age and they fit his system. Now that's the exact mould. If you consider like Rio Hatate, Matt O'Reilly, Juranovic, Joe Hart, all cost a combined like 6 million or something. I mean, that's madness.
That's insane.
When you think about it like that, and that's just good, solid scouting. And although Joe Hart's 35, he doesn't fit into the mould as such, but experience was required in that position. But it leaves me very, very hopeful for the future. And I just hope that the thing that he's put in place, that modernisation, in 10, 15 years, we're really seeing the benefit of it continuing.
Yep. 100% agree with you, because did the maths just, okay, going back to when Rangers died to now, and those little 1 to 2 million or to 3 million pound players that we signed just as attackers, right? We spent 26 million pound on those players over that period and didn't make hardly anything back on those. That's I'm talking about guys like Colin Kazim Richards, Amado Baldi, Stefan Skepkovic, and it goes on. Timu Puki. There you go. You add all those guys together, and you're like, what's all this for? Like,
Well, what that is that's an idea. The idea behind that is actually sound as a business model. It's buy these guys in cheap, develop them, sell them to clubs that have got a bigger budget. That's fine. A club with a financial sort of background to Celtic, that's quite a good business model. The problem is they weren't doing it right.
Yeah.
They were just going, oh, that guy looks okay, let's sign him. Well, that guy looks okay. There was no plan for, do they fit the system? Do they fit the culture? All the things we spoke about and just done well wasn't being done well before. Now, of course, you've got your Virgil van Dijks, your Kieran Tierney, etc. But that was almost by accident, not by design. And again, you're signing 10 players to get one really good one and hope that subsidises or the value you get is offset against all these other players coming in. So is the right idea done wrong? And I think finally we're starting to get it. Thus far, we'll be getting it right, because as we spoke about at the start, Andy's eye for a player has been incredible. There's so many guys just now. I mean, there's so many players over, you think of some of your favourite players at Celtic, and already I can see 3 or 4 players in this team that are going to be people's favourite players. Like my missus, I mentioned her earlier, she's really jealous of Jota because I'm always talking about him. She thinks I've got a man crush on him, and I have a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. I think he's incredible. I think Matt O'Reilly's going to be incredible. Furuhashi is already many players' favourites. You get Carter Vickers, who we've just signed at the back. These are guys that could be club legends. Juranovic is one of my personal favourite players of this squad. So you can already see there's something iconic building, I think, along the lines of the sort of Martin O'Neill era, where you had so many players that became iconic for the club in a relatively short space of time.
It's funny you say that because we said on our pod when we're doing the season review and a while back that this squad is just so likable.
Yeah.
Like you've had previous years, you've had a bunch of players in the team, and they're good players, but they're not. You don't really like them. And this squad, like there's just players like to me. I'll straight up. I was never really a massive fan back in the day of what's his name? He was Ronnie's assistant manager. Um, back in
Oh,
the
John Collins.
John Collins, never a fan of him. I
Yeah,
was
he's not particularly
what I'm
endearing
saying is
as John. Good player, but
good
not a
player,
particularly
was never a
friendly.
fan of him, didn't like him, like, couldn't cared less when he left. And then you look at it now and, like, the whole squad, it's like, if players move on, you're like, "Whatever." Like, Chris Ayers moved on, I'm like, "Whatever, go do what you need to do." But you look at this squad now and it's like, as you said, Carter Vickers, like him. You just go through 'em and there's so many players that you just wanna see do well and you just want best for them because it's just they get in the club, and I think it's probably Ange's mindset a bit too, but it's rubbing off on him. It's making everyone just they seem approachable. They seem like they want to be there for the right reasons, and you just like those players. So it's just been really good, especially over the last 12 months. But I was going to ask you, how do you think the recruitment's been over the last 12 to 18 months, and what current players do you think will be moving on in the next 6 to 12 months? Because with the recruitment being the way it is now, I think the next step in the evolution into phase two will be we've got to get those guys out, like your Barkas who's gone on loan, you're a Yeti. You got to clear those guys out so we can reduce that wage bill. So then we and get some money in, so then we can reinvest it again on top of the Champions League money. That's what I think. But I'd like to get your thoughts on first of all how you think the recruitment's been and who you think will be moving on.
I think recruitment, as I say, I think you've got to say with maybe one or two exceptions, recruitment's been absolutely excellent under Ange. It really has. I mean, and I'm so excited for those guys to get a full pre-season. Like Ariel Hatate, with a full pre-season, up to full fitness, rested, is going to be an exceptional player. Hugo Furuhashi, a full season. Can you remember? He was injured quite a lot of the season, as was Giacomakis. You know, those are two front men that are just, again, I think are going to have a massive, massive role to play. So I think recruitment's been really, really good. What's going to be interesting is you say is how many players leave. So I think we still need a left back. I think we need a centre back. I think we need a sort of defensive midfielder, and I think we need a winger. And so that's like your four players or so, 5 players, which seems a lot because you want to be first team ready. They want they got to come in and compete with the players already there. But if you consider you're going to likely lose, in my opinion, Liam Shaw, Urgidi, Sorrell, Ayeti, Barkas already going on loan, probably Julian. There's already been a few players released. Mikey Johnson, Karamo Kudumbele, they might all go. So, that's 9 players just there, aside from any other releases. They're going to get that wage bill down. Plus, we've got the Champions League money. Plus, I think what we may do is similar to what we've done with Jota and Carter Vickers that season. I think we may get players on loan with a buyout clause so that we actually don't pay for them till next season.
Yeah.
I think they'd be quite clever with that as well. They'll use that system well, which they've done well getting Carter Vickers. Jota's keeping us all on tender hooks, but it is looking likely he'll sign as well.
I say it's like putting them on, store credit. That's the way I describe it. It's a good way to sign them though, because try before you buy. And like you look at the 3 guys we had an agreement with Maeda straight up that it was an obligation, so that's fine. The other 2 guys have done well, and as you said, yeah, I agree with you on all those positions. Defensive midfielder, I think, is one that is underrated, especially with Bitton moving on, because we've got McCarthy, we've got Itaguchi there who could play that position, but then a Champions League, are they going to be up to that level? That's what my question is, because I would like Callum McGregor not to play as a number 6. I want to push him back into an 8 because that's his natural position. We've got Turnbull, um, we've got 2 10s, we've got Turnbull, and we've got O'Reilly. We have Hatate and McGregor playing the 8 spot, and then we have 2 guys playing the 6, whether it's Souza and Itaguchi, then we've got depth, which is what we need, and we've got options. You need a left. I think we need a left back, yes, but do a European quality one, like the way we did it right back with Juranovic. So he'll be someone. Taylor's good enough for the league, and he's improved a lot. But I think we need something above that for a Champions League. We need a left-sided centre back. Ko Itakura is the ideal candidate because he can also play defensive midfielder if need. But I think he's the ideal candidate there. And then Sean on our podcast this week said that I was like, do we need a third striker, especially if a Yeti moves on? And because I've been thinking in my head, is your winger. But he goes, no, Maeda is playing on the wing because that's his natural position, but he's also your third striker. If those guys are out, you'd put him at striker, so you'd need to bring in another guy to play in that left because otherwise you'd move Jota across and then you've got a Barter to go play on the right. So you've still got options.
Yeah,
But
the other thing as well, remember, is Abada can play as a striker as well.
yeah,
So if you had to, if you had a real crisis, he can move there.
if you get desperate, so can Jamesy Forrest. So there you go. We've got options.
The Forest. The other thing to remember as well is if you look at the type of wingers we've got at the club just now, Maeda and Abada are quite similar
Yeah.
in that they're not your traditional winger. They're almost more like a second striker coming in. So if you look at when Jota, say, on the left, if he's crossing Kyogo and Abada.
One runs front post, one runs back post.
Yep. But the problem is we don't really have another traditional style winger other than Jota. James Forrest is there, but I think he's winged it down a little bit. I think he's more just for emergencies and maybe squad continuity. So you need another Jota-like player who can sort of switch. So you've got Maeda, Jota, Abada, and X. So I totally agree with your calling, I think. A left winger and a traditional sort of winger. We were linked with the boy. I can't remember what his name is. The Norwegian guy that plays for Bodo Glimp, the left winger. That's the fella. So we're linked with him. He might be a good prospect, but
apparently he's agreed to move to somewhere in Italy, I think it was, or France or something. Yeah.
Come to Glasgow. Don't need to go to Italy or France. Come to Glasgow. That's better. It's more fun.
Come to sunny Glasgow. It's an upgrade on being up in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
You'll get a tan, mate. No, it's yeah, but there's a guy I think could be a good potential young signing that you could put as that winger, but then you could get from the A-League over here, which is Marco Tilio, who's thereabouts with the Australian national team. I think he'd be a good sort. He reminds me of a slightly more technical version of Daniel Arzani before he got injured. So he's one that I think we could come in and do a job. However, he's Melbourne City, so he's part of that City group. Mark Law will know all about him, that sort of thing. But my concern is if you bring him in as a 19 or 20-year-old winger, is he going to be clogging a spot that could be there for, say, an Owen Moffat coming through? If it's just going to be a backup striker as a fourth or fifth string winger, is that a spot that you want to push someone like Owen Moffat into, or you want to push like a Rocco Vada or something into to start bringing guys through from the Colts? Is that another way you look at it? Who knows?
This was the conversation I had around the goalkeeping position. So we're apparently close to agreeing a deal for Siegrist, who was at Dundee United. He's a very good keeper. But my concern was, well, if you've got Toby Oluwayemi at the Colt level, who's highly rated, and you've got a goalkeeping position comes up, and instead of promoting him, you sign someone else, doesn't send a very strong message to the Colts. So that's the dilemma you're in. With the wingers, I think you're right in principle. I think out the two you mentioned, Moffat and Vata, I think Vata's more likely to come in. I think he looks physically a bit more robust and a bit of height about him. He's technical, but he is only 17. And it's whether, if Jota gets injured, is he going to start in the Champions League with Abada on the other side?
Yeah, no.
That seems unlikely. And that's why I think at the moment we need to be signing players who aren't there for to be cover. They're there to compete for a starting position and push the rest in. So you get two strong players for every position. then the academy could sort of subsidise any squad gaps after that. But I think you need two strong, and there's no one in the academy at the moment, in my opinion, that is able to step up to that level. They could maybe cover in a domestic game. There's a guy, Dane Murray, who I'm a big fan of. I think he could probably, play domestically fairly comfortably. But again, if there's an injury crisis, you can't start having a Champions League at this stage. So I think that's where we're at squad-wise. So I can see your point, and I kind of agree. But I do think we need Champions League calibre reinforcements at the moment.
Funny thing is, I just said that to be the devil's advocate because I agree with what you're saying as well. But you've got to like, say the whole thing and look at both sides of the argument. So 100% agree on that. But yeah, I want us to strengthen, and because if we strengthen this is something that is going to sound odd. If we strengthen the team, we don't have to work for the Champions League. We don't have to worry about the league because if the team is strong enough to play at that level, then the league should take care of itself.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
when we're constantly doing squad fillers just as backups or whatever, then that's where situations happen where, we don't qualify for Champions League year on year. So I'd rather do what you're saying, go and sign guys there and then worry about the rest after that. But with Toby, just quickly before you kick on to the next topic, is I think Siegrist coming in would actually make sense because I'm not a massive fan of Bain. I don't rate him. However, because if you look at it now, if Hart got hurt and you're going into a Champions League game and you had to either put Bain in goal or Toby in goal, how would you feel?
I'll put Toby in, but that's because I don't rate Bain either, really.
Yeah. So if you got Siegrist or Toby, what would you do?
Siegrist.
Yeah, Siegrist because
I think you've got, ideally I would have Hart, Siegrist, Toby as my three keepers.
Yep.
And Bain, and I don't listen. He's reliable enough, but he doesn't fill me with any great confidence, and I don't think he organises our defence particularly well. So, but it's not that I think OIM is so good that he has to start. I just think out of all the academy graduates, if you're trying to, because we've the big problem keeping players. Ben Doak, for example, has went to Liverpool. The guys the previous years went to Bayern Munich, etc. If we've got players at that club in the academy level, we genuinely think can be future first teamers. They have to come in at some point, and if you've got an opportunity to put them in the squad, and you sign someone else, they're going to leave. They have to. So you've got to be very. It's like a tricky line to walk.
I understand what you're saying, and that ties into my next thing that I wanted to say, because for me, I think Toby would be. I wouldn't want to put him as the third string keeper. You know why? I'd rather he goes out and does the Christie / Aya sort of route. And if Xander Clark, for instance, leaves St Johnson, go play there for a season, or go to Dundee United and play there on loan in our league. You're not going to play against us, but you're going to get experience in the league we're going to play, and that's actually going to help him bridge the gap between Colts level and first team for Celtic, because he's going to be playing in the league against the same teams at the same grounds he'd be playing at in a year or two for us. I think that would probably be more beneficial for him in this particular case than being our third stringer sitting on the bench behind two other experienced keepers.
Yep, I think that's a shout. I would agree with that. Generally speaking, I don't. Given how Ange plays, there's no other team in Scotland plays like him, right? So your outfield players, I don't see an awful lot of point of them going on loan to other Scottish clubs, because they're not going to play or train the way Angela's at Celtic.
Yep.
Our keeper's very, very different, right? He's not
specialised position.
Yeah, so, and if he goes to a club in Scotland, as you say, he's playing against that calibre opposition. He's playing and if he goes to a team like a St Johnstone, for example, he's going to be in action a lot. He's going to have to play and play well.
The touches that he needs.
Correct, and so I think that's positive. So I think that's keeper's probably the only position I think going on loan to Scotland, another club in Scotland would benefit. But outfield, I don't think it benefits, especially because Ange's got such a by all accounts anyway, such an intense training regime with the players. in such a high intensity, high level of fitness. If they leave Celtic to go somewhere else, they're not going to come back peak condition to fit straight in there anyway.
Yep. So now, Brian, we're going to get on to the fun stuff for you because I know you've got to get back to work in a little bit. So we'll just quickly crack on to this is my fun questions. So who would be your all-time favorite Celtic player other than Henrik Larsson and why?
That's almost impossible to answer, I think, just purely because
Rattle off a couple then if you want.
yeah, there's so many. I tell you the one that springs to mind that I think no one talks about enough, and it's Nakamura, Zaki Nakamura. I think I always remember, and I'll always remember to the day I die, his goal against Man United, the free kick when we beat Man United. I think he was such a graceful footballer, and I think at times he could be quiet during a game, but his touch was incredible. He was so clever. He just had that sort of something special about him. Boric as well for the same era. Big Arthur, the holy goalie. Just I loved his craziness as well as his ability. I think there's something nice about him. I tell you one of the players I liked the best, and it was actually because I got to know him a little bit, was Scott McDonald, fellow Aussie. And he was at Celtic not only because I think he was a bit of a surprise package during that same era under Strachan, but he's also one of the nicest guys alive as well. He was a great dude. So shout out to Scotty. I mean, you could go for hours. You've got Neil Lennon, club legend, Scott Brown, currently Callum McGregor's up there. Tommy Burns, obviously, everybody loved Van Hooijdonk. There's too many to go over, I think. But Nakamura is just that. I always like players that are really technically quite special, and he for me is someone that I think actually maybe a wee bit underrated.
Well, that's going to make your next question a bit hard then, because I always go, who's your all-time favorite? And then I'll go into who would be your all-time top 5 players that you've seen play for Celtic in your lifetime? And if you can't do that, make your all-time five-a-side team for Celtic that you see in your lifetime. So if you can do it that way, so if you want to go one keeper, one or two defenders, one or two midfielders, one or two strikers, whatever, and do it that way, if that'll make it a bit more.
Yep. So you've got five-a-side team. You've got Boric in goals, Van Dijk and Tierney at the back. Obviously Larsson up front. In midfield, Moravcik and Lennon.
Nah, that's 6 players.
Oh shit! I forget 5 outfield.
Or are you going to say no keeper and just go and outscore everyone?
Yeah. Listen, if you get that outfield team, though, so we'll go again. We'll go Boric, Van Dijk, Lennon, Moravcik, Larsson.
Nice. There you go. Kieran Tierney's your 6th man on the bench. Happy days. All right. What would be some of the most memorable games that you have seen Celtic play, and what's so memorable about them to you? Just go 1 or 2 if you want.
So the one that always springs to mind, and I mentioned them earlier, was when Scott McDonald scored the winner against AC Milan at Parkhead last minute. I remember watching that game, and AC Milan, I think, were champions at the time, and at that era, we just seemed unbeatable at Parkhead. We really seemed to force that sort of fortress Parkhead mentality, and against AC Milan, who were one of the best in the world at the time, it was just incredible to beat them. Now, of course, we went on to beat Barcelona under Lennon 2-1, but just the way the game panned out, the fact that that squad under Strachan, we got to the Champions League twice, and it was quite a limited squad, really. We had, Stephen McManus, Gary Colwell as centre halves. We had Paul Hartley, midfield. Side guys like Barry Robson, Scott McDonald. These weren't household names, and yet we went to the last 16 Champions League twice. And there's just something about that era I sort of love. So the AC Milan game, certainly. The Manchester United Celtic away game, we lost 3-2. Benny Hesslink and Nakamura scored another free kick. And the reason that's so memorable was because I went down and I was assured by a mate of mine that I had the ticket until I got there, got to Old Trafford, and he's like, yeah, we don't have tickets. So the only ticket I could get was for the Man U end, which would have been fine if I wasn't caked in green and white with like a big like shamrock hat, and I'd had a few drinks that day, and I was just in a sea of red. And we scored first, and I remember like the crowd sort of turning and looking round at me, and it was a bit of an experience to say the least. But it
Did
all
you blow
sticks
them
in my head
kisses,
that.
or what'd you do?
Sorry,
To celebrate, you blow them kisses? What'd you do?
I celebrated when Vinny Hessling scored. I jumped up, and then I was a lot calmer the second time we scored. To be fair, although I did hurl abuse at Ryan Giggs for diving, which didn't make me popular.
You gotta love that sort of situation. Away days in the wrong end. Brilliant. Okay, last question for you, Brian. So, I'll set the situation for you. Celtic is owned by some sheik. Money's no issue. Don't have to worry about wages. Don't have to worry about a transfer fee. Don't have to worry about, work permits, anything. Okay. The situation is that's what it is. Now, who would be the one player that you have seen play in your lifetime and wish that Celtic could have signed them? And it's other than Messi and Ronaldo. Who would that be?
This is actually quite easy for me. Andrea Pirlo. I just thought Andrea Pirlo was one of the best players ever to play football. I loved him. I love that position, that sort of deep line playmaker. I always
Yep.
find it really fascinating. And I remember saw him playing against Scotland for Italy and against Celtic for AC Milan, and it was just always in space, never broke a sweat. He did the big long hair, and it never looked out of place. He just never looked hassled.
Always that time on the ball. Yep.
Oh man, his passing range was incredible, and I just think if you had a guy like that at Celtic, just picking up balls and pinging them over to your creative players, just incredible. He's just one of those players that, again, as I say, I think I just always loved watching him. I always wished we had a player like him, and as good as him. And so yeah, undoubtedly it'd be Angelo Pirlo.
There you go. I think it's the first time he's been the answer for there, but that's why I love that question because it's like so many random people it could be. So it's Andrew Pirlo. Nice. It's a good selection. Funny thing is, you like that you're saying the deep line playmaker pinging balls out to the attackers. Andrew's teams over here always had that. So I'm hoping if we sign this Vinicius, he's not just the guy who's going to go and put studs in the shins. He's actually got a bit of playmaking ability like that too, where he could do that. Because, yeah, at Melbourne Victory, he had Mark Milligan. At Brisbane, he had some guy. I can't remember who it was. I know exactly what he looks like. I'm just having a mental blank because, it's getting late. But, yeah, I'm hoping we get something like that as well because I know it won't be at Pirlo level, but I'm being realistic, but let's get someone in for that role. But, yeah, happy days. So, unless
So
you've got anything else you wanna add or give a shout out to there, where can people find you, Brian, on the social media and yeah, and on the Axon?
yep. So you can find me on a Celtic State of Mind podcast every Wednesday, and occasional guest appearances on other days, and on Twitter at Brian Degning. I'm the only Brian Degning in the world, which is a fact. So I shouldn't be hard to find. So yeah, hit me up on Twitter, Jarrod. I'm so grateful to come on and chat to you. It's really nice to talk to our Aussie cousins, and it's been a real pleasure, mate.
No worries. Thanks for coming on again. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for tuning in and hail hail.